put your hands together for Patrick McDowell, Creative Director and Founder at Patrick McDowell, and Charlotte Borst, Innovation Manager at Fashion for Good.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. My name is Charlotte Borst. I'm from the innovation platform Fashion for Good and very pleased to be here. And yeah, I'm very excited to take a bit of a different angle in this session and yeah, look at the creative side and the design stage when it comes to biomaterials. So Paul, can you quickly introduce yourself and to set the scene, explain a bit about the role of the design stage and how important it is for that to be considered from the very beginning onwards?
So I started my brand, which is named after me, which is surprisingly embarrassing sometimes in conversations like this. And really from the beginning, I'd worked in luxury. I'd been making things out of old things since I was a kid. This all started when I was 13 when I wanted a new school bag. My parents wouldn't buy me one, so I turned a pair of jeans into a bag and was really fascinated by that kind of transformational process and continued working in that way. And then worked in luxury, was really kind of disheartened by how the industry worked and continues to work and wanted to set up something different. So when I graduated from St. Martin's, I started a brand really with that focus, very design-led, using the training that I have from that school, but then also thinking about how can we change the business model and do things differently. And I think, it's a very interesting time in fashion. We're seeing incredible developments in this space. Fabric development has changed significantly, even in the short 6 years since I've been running my brand. It's a really, really compelling and very much needed in the wider fashion industry. And I think luxury in fashion is really important because it really sets the trends for the whole of the industry. We know the industry has many issues. It's vast in its size, and so when you can showcase something in luxury, that's when you can then start to see the adoption from the rest of the fashion industry, which is what we really need.
Thank you, Paul. You have also already worked. Patrick, sorry. You have already worked with quite a few biomaterial innovators. Can you share a bit more about those collaborations and give a few examples?
Yeah, sure. So with our shows at Fashion Week, traditionally they're used to kind of showcase creative vision, and we do that as well as showcasing kind of material innovation. So often brands will come to us when they have a new material and say, is this something you might be able to use in your new show? Most recently, I've been announced as global design ambassador for Ecovative. They were speaking here yesterday, the mycelium technology company, which is a really fascinating position for me because every time they develop a new material, they're currently developing into kind of the leather space. We're trialing it, using it with our manufacturers, using my design knowledge to think what's the best product to use this material for, and then feeding back to them on all of the different, manufacturing, machinery, design comments that we get. And we're finding that to be a really great partnership. It's fascinating for me because I'm a fabric geek, and also great for them because as the material's being developed, they're having the insight into the industry and how it works. And so instead of coming to a designer at kind of like stage 20, they're coming much earlier, and we're finding that to be a really positive relationship.
I really like how you also really try to adapt to the material as opposed to adapting to the material to a specific application that you're thinking of. So that is really inspiring, and I wish more brands would work like that as well. So what would you say are a few things that developers and producers in the biomaterial space should consider based on your collaborations and learnings?
I mean, I think for me, it's really important to get the designers in as early as you can. I think a luxury product starts in the design room, right? So you need the buy-in from the designers, really, for it to be adapted, for the industry to adapt to it. So I think having the designers, the people using the product, and that's across all industries, right? Whether it's a car or furniture or fashion, having the people that will actually be selecting it and using it in the room when you're developing it makes such key differences to those developments because you have that live feedback. You've got prototypes that are actually designed. So we're not talking about kind of like a general bag or or shoe. We're talking about an actual design product that's being used in the design office of a brand, and then the feedback is invaluable to then develop the material. And what we found with Ecovita, for example, is that the design feedback is actually to lean into the natural quality of the mycelium and think about how we can embrace that rather than trying to change it to completely match leather. And I think that's also quite an interesting conversation to think about what are the actual natural properties of the innovation you've created and how can you lean into those rather than trying to replace something which already exists.
Exactly, yeah, that's really interesting because, of course, there are lots of alternatives for leather or that are trying to mimic the properties of leather. But yeah, it's really great that you're also exploring those other applications. Did you find any surprises in like working with Ecovative, like any surprising applications or anything that you found out by experimenting with that material?
I mean, yeah, so many. I think the main one is that mycelium grows in different densities. Kind of the main sprouting body is very dense, and then it gets less dense, and so you kind of end up with different densities in the material, which then means that it takes dye differently, and so it's very difficult to achieve an equal color without coating it, and obviously that has lots of issues. And so that was a big challenge for them until I actually saw what it looked like when you dye it normally and you get all these different colors. And I said, oh, wow, what is this? This is so interesting. And they were like, oh, no, that's the bit we don't want you to see. That's the back, or that's the part we don't want people to. And I was thinking, but that's so interesting, right? That's something I can't get with leather. If I wanted to get that with leather, I'd have to do loads of different treatments, and it would take a long time and be quite complicated. And whereas this is something that the material naturally does. And that was the feedback across many different designers as well. So it's, like I said, sometimes about leaning into the natural qualities of the innovation.
Yeah, I love that. And you're working also with quite a few global fashion brands. So can you also share a bit more about those collaborations and, yeah, especially what role the luxury sector plays? How does the approach differ within that segment? And yeah, where is it in the agenda and how we can push it a bit higher?
Yeah, for sure. So I consult for different brands. When I first started, we were working with Burberry and Swarovski on different ways to use their materials, and I have a more public brand now, a public position now with Pinko, which is a premium Italian women's wear label where the official role is Sustainability Creative Director, and the point of that role was to try to merge those two parts of the business, which don't often kind of meet and see eye to eye. So the idea was really to get somebody in at the director level where you can actually make the decisions and choose fabrics and implement something, because in fashion, in luxury especially, when a creative director asks for something, that's usually on their desk very quickly, right? And so if that's the brief for the collection, if you can add sustainability into that, if you can add innovation into that, you start to see changes adapted by brands very quickly. A great case study for that was Gabriella Hurst at Chloe. She was there recently, she's now left, but we saw very quick changes at Chloe. They became B Corp certified, lots of material innovations were used. It's really interesting when the creative gets behind it. So that being said, it is more challenging. My own brand is very small. Intentionally, we limit what we're able to produce, so we only do around 400 units a season, and it's very small. But then obviously at global brands, they're already running big ships, and so you have to make compromises and use things like coatings to get it over the line. And so it's not perfect, but it is fascinating for me to be able to see both sides of that coin.
Yeah, I like that. And how far do you see luxury as a segment play a different role? Maybe more of a trailblazer role, or what would you say?
I think luxury is really interesting, especially, well, in all design really, because it's normal for luxury to develop their own materials, right? So it would be normal for a luxury collection to include weaves, colors, prints, even the fabric itself that has been developed for that house by those designers. And so there's a lot of opportunity there to work with fabric innovation to also design their own materials, which is really exciting. Because it's design-led usually, I think there's a lot of skill set you can lean into there to think about how do we showcase this in the best way. And like I said before, I think especially in fashion, because the industry trickles down from luxury, it's really important that the innovation at the earliest stage is being shown in that space in the best way on the runway in a way that's really designed, because that's how you convince people, right? Show me the product being used in a way that's really beautiful and convincing. And then if I'm a design-led company, that's what will make me think, okay, now I'm going to make the leap, because luxury is based off the use of century-old materials, right? It's wool, silk, leather, cotton. So convincing people that are used to working with things that have been around for that long is going to take some passion, I think.
Yeah, I like that. And overall, what would you say are kind of like other key drivers to push biomaterial innovation more up the agenda?
I think so many fashion houses are based in Europe, and there's so much legislative change happening here now, so that's really helping. I think a wider kind of conscious awareness of creatives to make changes is also really helping. And also for people that are really interested in fabric like me, it's really fascinating, you know, to be able to work with people that create these kind of innovations is so interesting. I was in upstate New York recently to visit Ecovitive's farms, and it's so fascinating. You know, I never thought as a fashion designer I would be in a mushroom farm, but there I was. And so that's, as a creative, that's really special, I think.
Yeah, and bringing those stories to the broader public as well. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, because that's essentially what we're doing, right, with luxury, whether it's furniture or fashion or any design, you're telling a story, and that's why people buy into a brand. So I think all of this really helps to layer in why someone would be purchasing a luxury product in, you know, this day and age.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. You're also very engaged in education. So, yeah, I would also love to hear from you how we can inspire the next generation of biomaterial designers to push this category forward.
Yeah, I mean, I've always believed that working with the next generation of talent is super important, because they're ultimately the ones that will probably be using a lot of the materials we're kind of trialing today. Also because the brand learns so much from working with them, right? So I'm an ambassador for Graduate Fashion Week in London, and work with them looking at all the different graduates each year, which is really amazing. And then with Pinko, for example, we've set up a scholarship at Sandra St. Martin's to support a sustainably focused designer. We've also set up an internship program to look at sustainable design with students, bringing them over to their head office in Fidenza in Italy. So I just think it's really important that we always think holistically about sustainability and think about the people involved, who's making the things that we're creating, where they come from, but also how we can support people to then have the right knowledge in the future to make real change in the industry. Yeah.
How do you see that has changed since you, for example, studied? Like, did you see that evolve?
Yeah, so much. It's actually really positive. There was a sustainability lecture series that started at St. Martin's when I studied there, and I remember being one of the only people in the room. And nobody really understood why we would need that. And only 5 years later, there was a queue out the door, and they couldn't actually fit everybody in. And this is a big lecture hall. It's like 500 people. And so I think that's so positive, and that in itself was already a few years ago. So we're really seeing this big change, and the students are asking for it. They're really interested in it. The material innovation, like I said, over the past 5 years is game-changing from where it was 5 years ago, and what we're able to use as a brand, what's actually on the market, instead of just a tiny square that we're being shown at a fair. So I think everything's moving in the right direction. I know it can be frustrating for people that have been working in it for a long time, but I think it's a very positive outlook in fashion.
That's great to hear. Lastly, you alluded to it already a bit, but can you share a bit more on how the bio-based materials or the bio-based materials connect with your commitment to craftsmanship and the artisanal process that you're applying?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. It really, when I went to see that mushroom farm in upstate New York, for me, that was craft. It's modern day craft, right? There is a scientific process that has been honed over a long time to develop the right kind of material to grow in a certain way to create a certain product, and that's no different to creating the right kind of leather or the right kind of wool and weaving it in a certain way and then dyeing it in a certain way. And so all of this for me is also craft, and I think so much of the material innovation space is very craft-based. It's just perhaps being done by scientists instead of artisans. And so I think when you start to flip it like that and think of it as a craft-based thing, it can be really beautiful, and you can really start to kind of connect all the amazing things that we do. Like this was actually the one that was just on the screen was a trial of Ecovativ's latest leather, mushroom leather. Yeah. And that skirt has the mushroom padding in that they developed a year ago. So, so yeah, I think adding that kind of real craftsmanship around making the material to our craftsmanship of making garments is very special, and ultimately convinces people that this is the right kind of material to then go on and use at scale.
Really inspiring. We are at time, but thank you so much for sharing your insights and bringing the design perspective, and I hand back to Paul.